has been implementing this for almost a year now. So he's got really good insights into the practicalities of the Future Fit benchmarking, what it can bring for an organisation. Chloe's done a brief intro, but I will just reiterate. I'm Sally. I'm with Proxima. We're a boutique sustainability consulting firm based in Auckland, and we specialise in corporate strategy and reporting, and we've been an accredited partner of Future Fit for a couple of years now. And I'll pass over to Roger, who's co-hosting, to introduce himself.
Thanks, Sally. Kia ora, everyone. I'm very excited to be part of this conversation this evening. And I was reflecting when listening to Meg's beautiful poetry that this session is a bit at the other end of the spectrum in terms of being quite systems based and almost got a bit of an engineering kind of feel to it. So I hope you're up for that, but it will be interesting and engaging as well, especially if you all take the opportunity to chip in with questions and reactions in whatever way you see fit. And I think for this session, anybody that can and wants to have their video on, that's not going to be a problem at all. So I'd encourage you to do that. And anyway, sorry, by way of introduction, yes, I'm Roger, and I work for Plant and Food Research, which is a research organisation working on supporting our horticultural, arable and seafood industries here in New Zealand. So I look after a bunch of scientists.
Perfect. And we've had Chloe's intro, which is great. Chloe's going to be helping us out in the exercise part as well. So you'll get to chat to her a bit more. If you do have questions as we go, I hope this will be sort of quite conversational. When I'm presenting my slides, and I promise you this isn't all slides, we're going to get off these slides soon, I can't actually see the chat box. So if you're asking things in the chat, we can circle back to it. In saying that though, we've just done intros of me and Roger, but if everybody sort of wants to introduce themselves in the chat as we go, so everyone gets a feel of who's there, that would be really special. And really cool. But other than that, we'll kick into it because we've got quite a cool action-packed program to get through. So I'll just give you a brief overview of the goals. If my slides let me do that. But essentially, Future Fit is a UK-based charity. It was set up by two pretty incredible thinkers, Martin Rich and Jeff Kendall, who both came from the finance industry and are really passionate about the potential of mobilizing capital to basically create solutions for these massive societal and environmental challenges that we face. But where they sort of began is looking at how we do business and how we define success for business is fundamentally flawed. And they came up with, well, they didn't come up with, but they looked at the system and recognized that traditionally, businesses were optimized to create what they call shareholder value. So everything that a business does is in pursuit of profits. Sod the environment, sod the society. Basically, they're just chasing profits and don't have to worry about any of their impacts on the environment or society. Where we're sort of heading, or where we sort of are and evolving to, is this concept of shared value, or business creating shared value. So we're starting to see overlap between a business's activities and how it can impact or positively impact the environment and society, but there's only sort of small overlaps, and we get this, we come to this sort of flawed sense of we're trading off any good that we're doing. So while we might be doing some good, let's say we're talking about a pharmaceutical company that's creating drugs that are healing people, while we may be doing some good, it can be still at the expense of environmental society. So we might be creating those jobs using really terrible working conditions in the supply chain, or degrading the environment with really water intensive production purposes. So while shared value is moving in the right direction, we're still not quite there. So where Jeff and Martin really saw that business should be heading is this idea of systems value. So we need to be looking at business in a really holistic way and recognizing that it's part of a larger system. So a business is part of society, which sits within the environment. And the best way of probably talking about this is to think about, if we have runaway climate change or environmental degradation that's going to massively impact society, and no business can really function on a dead planet, which is actually not my words, but they're very true. So this is sort of the background thinking behind the Future Fit Business Benchmark. But Jeff and Martin wanted to make this more than just a utopian dream of how we sort of move towards this idea of business creating systems value. And they wanted to create an actionable and practical framework that would give businesses the tools to move from an intention to do good to the actual ability to do good. So really easily implementable resources. It would also give investors consistent, comparable and forward-looking data so that investors would be able to invest in businesses that are actually genuinely doing good. And that also respects the societal and planetary limits that we need to be able to live and flourish on this planet. So what they did was define what a future fit society would look like. And they did this drawing on a whole range of peer reviewed system science that's been around for 30 plus years, and they defined 8 properties of a future fit society. And I just invite you to, for a moment, just take a look at those 8 properties and consider what it would take business. It could be any business, could be your own business, a business you know well. What would it take that business to operate in a way that respects each of these properties? And I guess, do we know any businesses that are genuinely operating in a way that does respect all these properties? So just reflect on that. I mean, if you've got any ideas, feel free to pop them in the chat or keep them to yourself, roll the ideas around your head. And then from those 8 properties, they drew a line in the sand, and they basically said for any business that wants to credibly be doing good, it must eliminate its own negative impact across each of those properties. And then they further broke them down into these 23 break-even goals. So you'll see the 8 properties are there down the left, and then they've got these 23 break-even goals that every single business should be taking action on if it wants to avoid slowing down society's progress towards future fitness. And I just want to stop here and say it's a charity. So all of these resources are available online. Sitting behind each of these goals is a really comprehensive, easy to use set of what they call action guides. So every single goal has its own action guide. It's about 20 pages worth of really valuable information that helps a business understand what the goal means, understand how that goal applies to that business, and how it can prioritize action on the goals. In addition to those action guides, they've got a free online Excel calculator that allows a business to input data into the calculator and get a score for each of these goals. So the idea is that each business gets a score from 0% to 100% based on its action towards each of the goals. And to illustrate that, I've got this is actually Proxima's baseline on Future Fit. So you'll see there's every single goal there. We've been through, we've understood how the goals apply to all of us. I'm doing a sort of quite surface level intro here, but feel free, you can navigate to the website and dig into it more. But you'll see we've been able to identify where we were scoring really well. You'll see there's a few 0%ers there because we were a small business and we actually didn't have a lot of policy suites or that sort of thing in place. So it was a really good exercise for us to kind of take a good hard look at ourselves. And then those sort of grey dotted lines were projected scores. So it basically not only shows you where you are, but gives you really clear steps to making meaningful progress on the goals. And in addition to eliminating its own negative impact, the benchmark recognises that businesses can also create positive impact. So work with others or create solutions that actually regenerate business. And they've got a whole set of positive pursuits, which I'm just going to nip through a bit in the interest of time. But again, these are all open source, all available online, freely available and easily implementable. But where I just want to take a little bit of time is to just explain why this is actually relevant to the Sustainable Development Goals and why we are running this session. So the Future Fit business benchmark enables a company to address all 17 sustainable development goals holistically and at the target level and authentically. And that's really important. So what Future Fit did when it was basically creating all of these goals is it mapped each of its break-even goals to the SDGs using a really rigorous mapping criteria. And it did that to the target level. So there's 17 sustainable development goals, but there's 169 targets that sit underneath those goals. And if we want to be taking meaningful action to delivering on those goals, we need to be looking at those targets and actually taking action at that level. So Future Fit's done all the thinking, mapped all the goals. And what this means is that a company can say that they're holistically taking action to the goals. And why that's important is that the SDGs are integrated. So if you take action on one of the goals, it will also most likely have impacts on another goal. And we need to balance those. And that's probably best illustrated here. And this might look a little bit familiar with where we started, which is hopefully going to come full circle. So what we are seeing is businesses are taking sort of 3 different approaches to addressing the SDG goals, which is defensive, selective, or holistic. So a defensive route would be for a business to say, we don't really need to address these goals at all because we're already doing it. We're creating jobs and we are kind of looking at our emissions, but they're not really that relevant for us. The second approach, it's just double whammy, both of them. That's great. The second approach is selective. So some businesses might pick 1 or 2 SDGs and say, again, we'll go back to the pharmaceutical example. We're positively impacting SDG 3 because we sell drugs that help to solve illnesses, and maybe SDG 12 because we sell consumer drugs. But at what expense? So again, what if there's really awful human rights infringements in their supply chain and you're actually sort of contributing negatively to other goals? It might be SDG 1, no poverty, or you're using terrible amounts of water and polluting waterways, like contributing poorly to SDG 6. So what Future Fit has recognised is that we need to take, or businesses need to be thinking holistically about all of the goals, taking into account its activities across its full supply chain. And what it's done in mapping out these break-even goals is basically created a way for businesses to credibly take holistic action on the goals. So that's a very whirlwind introduction into all of the goals. I'll just finish up with a Mentimeter before passing on to Roger. But I will, hang on, just let me swap over screens. Oh, actually, I've just noticed the time, so we're not going to do a Mentimeter. And good time management interests, I'm going to pass over to Roger. He's just going to do a deep dive on the goal.
Thanks, Sally. And a couple of observations before I do. One, every time I hear Sally or one of her colleagues giving some kind of summary overview of the benchmark, I'm more pleased that as an organisation we've adopted this as one of the tools in our toolkit to try and improve our performance on sustainability and our contribution to the SDGs. And the second general point I wanted to make was looking through the chat, the number of people that have introduced themselves, and what an amazing range of perspectives and skills and worldviews are on this call. So that's awesome, and I hope you all get a lot from it. So that was by way of introduction. So I mentioned that Plant and Food Research is a scientific research organisation. And that's an important piece of context in relation to the particular break-even goal that I want to talk about. Before I get into the detail of that, Sally mentioned that there are the break-evens related to doing no harm, and then there are the opportunities for organisations to do positive good. And I think it would be fair to say, as an organisation undertaking scientific research to improve the sustainability of horticultural and arable and seafood production, we've always felt pretty good about the sort of good we're doing to society and New Zealand generally, and supporting our farmers and so on, but had paid rather scant attention to our own operations. So although I'm going to be talking about one of the break-evens, the do no harm break-evens, that's important, but it's within the context of it being also important that we do this bigger piece around doing good as well. So, and the particular break-even I wanted to talk about was procurement, because everybody will get that organisations and individuals buy stuff, and we should care about where we buy it from. And Sally's already alluded to some of the reasons why we should care about where we buy it from. And for plant and food research, procurement is a big issue. We buy a lot of stuff. We've got more than 2,000 individual suppliers, and I haven't totted up how many items that we buy or the diversity of items, but it will run into the hundreds of thousands. So where do you start if you're trying to assess your sustainability credentials in relation to your supply chain? So the Future Fit Business Benchmark approach to this is to do what it calls a hotspot assessment. So for each of those dimensions that Sally mentioned, those 8 areas, and I won't name them all, but energy and water and people and waste and so on, all of those 8 areas, you look at your supply chains in relation to ideally every single product that you purchase, and say, have we got good reason to think that there might be a particular issue with this supply chain in relation to one of those 8 dimensions? So we realistically, certainly in a short time frame, can't do that hotspot assessment on thousands upon thousands of items. So we've had to figure out a way of practically approaching this that is credible and honors the kind of system science approach of the benchmark, but we can actually do, because we really want to make progress on this. So our approach was to identify our top suppliers, our top 50 suppliers by value, by the amount of money we spend with them. And as it happens, our top 50 suppliers represent 50% of our total procurement spend. And then we said, okay, of those top 50 suppliers, let's identify the top products that we purchase by volume rather than by value. And the reason we've done that is because we might buy 3 rather expensive office chairs in a year, but we buy thousands of pieces of lab consumable plastic, for example. So we can probably make greater progress and have greater impact by looking at the high volume things that we buy. So anyway, you've got to make some decisions. So we decided, we've identified our top suppliers by value, our top products by volume, and then we have tried to group those together in rational categories of products that you would expect to have a similar kind of hotspot assessment in terms of, for example, their energy use or their water use or where they're coming from, and potential human rights issues associated with that and so on. And in doing so, we're hopefully going to be covering somewhere between 30 and 50% of our total procurement in this first cut. So that's practically what's been involved. A lot of work, very complicated. We are a large organization and we're spending millions of dollars a year on, as I say, thousands of things, but we have made a start on that. So thinking about some of the insights that we've gained from the process so far, which is by no means complete. And I don't mean to be glib here, but we buy 44,000 toilet rolls a year. Who knew? Who knew? We buy 20 tons of coffee. The real insight so far has been actually how little we know or how little we knew about our supply chains. And I think in terms of opportunities and next steps, even from this fairly early stage of our journey on the benchmarking our procurement, it's clear that we could benefit from some simplification and rationalization. There's just a good business case for really looking at whether we need to have such a range of choice, in fact, whether we should be limiting that and rationalizing a bit. particularly strangely enough on the tea, coffee, milk, those items, we see some really early wins there in terms of looking at the most ethical sources that we can find of coffee, sugar, tea, for example, and thinking quite hard about where we get our milk from, because we consume as an organization a great deal of milk in a year. So those are just some early wins, but I'm hopeful as we dig more into this, we'll get some more insights into how we can manage our supply chain. Whilst we are really interested in the quantitative nature of the benchmark and we're interested in measuring progress, the thing that's really important is the way the benchmark is able to shine light on our business and provide us with information to make better decisions, in this instance around our procurement, but across the business. And great, if we manage to increase our score over time, that would be awesome. But this is really about the insights that the benchmark can provide. So I think that probably dives deeply enough into procurement. Do you reckon, Sally?
I reckon that was perfect, Roger. Good to hear about your tea and coffee. But yeah, as Roger said, it's no small task to look at a supply chain, especially one as big as plant and food. So thank you, Roger, for sharing. What we're going to do now is have a bit of an interactive exercise. So in a second, Chloe will work her magic, her Zoom magic, and whisk us all into break-even rooms. But before she does that, I'll just intro the exercise and give you an idea of what we're going to be doing. So basically our task tonight is to do a little bit of SDG mapping ourselves to get a feel for the goals, and how we're going to do that is, you'll see on the left here, there's all the very wonderfully crafted 17 sustainable development goals. And then in the middle, we've got a break-even goal. So just to break it down for you, we're, as an example, we're looking at water use as environmentally responsible and socially equitable. So this is one of the break-even goals. Here in the italics, we've got sort of what the spirit of the goal is. So a future fit business protects its freshwater resources by minimising water consumption in commercial and industrial activities, and also ensuring its discharges do not degrade the water quality of the receiving watersheds. And then just to sort of explain what that means in more detail, this essentially requires a company to ensure that the volume of its water consumption doesn't exceed the limits of the system, to ensure that its activities are not harming its water sources or limiting the availability of water to other users in the system, both natural and people, and also ensure that the quality of water leaving its operations is safe to enter the water catchment at the end. So the task that we're looking at tonight is basically identifying if a company were taking meaningful action on the future fit goal, so this water goal, what other SDGs would it also be contributing to? And you'll see on the right here, we've got a bunch of guiding questions. So just so you can get a feel for what we're doing. So we're taking action on this goal, create positive outcomes for ecosystems, and what SDGs would this relate to? Well, if we think about water, we think about the spirit of the goal, what we're doing is ensuring that ecosystems who around the surrounding water catchment, or who draw from that catchment, are able to meet their needs. So yes, we can say sort of life below water relates to this, life on land would relate to this, would require taking action on this goal, require innovating a change in business production methods or structures. Well, we're looking at industrial activities, commercial and industrial activities. So we might have to change to reduce consumption. We might have to change how we do business. So responsible consumption and production would be relevant. We're taking action on this goal, create improved social outcomes for our businesses, employees, wider community or society. We're looking at the quality of water leaving the system, and also how much water we're using. So that's clean water and sanitation. And we're taking action on this goal, create improved environmental outcomes. Yes, it would, but I think we've covered them all in these two goals here. So that's a sort of brief overview. When you're in your breakout rooms, Roger, Chloe and I will be moving these pieces, but you'll each have this in front of you so you can see what we're doing. But you'll have 2 other goals, so you get some flavour of other goals. And we'll just have a little bit of a discussion and a go at this exercise. So Chloe, take it away.
Oh, kia ora everyone. I'm just about to press the magic button, so you'll be moving into your rooms. Yes, as Sally said, either with Sally, Roger, or myself. You've got about 8 minutes. I think that still feels okay with timing. Roger and Sally, feel free to tell me if it's, I'm seeing nods.
It's all good.
Yeah.
Yep, cool. So let's roll. I think we've got 2 break-even goals each, but you know, we'll start with 1 and see where the conversation goes. So we'll see you all soon. Cool. Kia ora. Those that are left with me. Cool. I've just got a couple more people I need to assign. Oh, did I just lose someone? Sorry, bear with me. I'm trying to like manage the breakout rooms and just shuffle people around. So I'll just bring you out to the main session. Madeline, hopefully you can join us. Cool. Okay, I've still got 1 person who might need a home, but I might just pop them into room 1. Okay, brilliant. Cool, kia ora, welcome. Yeah, you've heard enough from me, I think. Oh, there's Madeline. Hi there, sorry, I think you got jumped around a little bit, didn't you? Apologies about that.
Okay.
Cool, yay, awesome. Hey, so yeah, we've got about 8 minutes. That's good because it's 8 o'clock, so that's good for my timing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen so that you can all see that that exercise that Sally was doing before. So let me just do that quickly. But while I'm figuring that one out, should we do a very quick look around the room and just introduce ourselves and either what organisation we're from or what hat we're wearing tonight?
Kia ora, do you want me to go first? My name's Kawa. I'm an accountant, chartered accountant for BDO here in Christchurch, business advisory firm. Kind of SDGs, my passion. Before COVID, I got to go to the UN and kind of see where it all happened. Gender equality is my key goal, but I love them all. And in terms of from a work perspective, it's really cool to see how do you report on this. And for us, it's a lot about our public, like our not-for-profit organisations that have to do like statements of service performance for their reporting. So outputs and outcomes, but also how do we look at that impact as well. Thank you.
Cool, kia ora.
Kia ora, I'm Madeline and I work for myself. I have a particular passion around raising resilient children and looking at the impact of parenting, but actually looking at the impact of marketing on parenting, which means that we have to look at the way that our businesses market, because if we don't grow children who are empathetic and understand the way the world is, we won't be able to collaborate. So we have to go right back to look at actually growing human beings that have the capacity to have these kinds of conversations. So I'm really interested in influencing the conversation so that people pay attention, because otherwise we'll fail, because we've got so many narcissistic people in the world at the moment. That's me.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, everyone. I'm Sudesh. I work for ESR as a social scientist. I'm originally from Nepal, and yeah, I think like in Nepal, I used to work in development sector. So I worked before the SDG. There was a Millennium Development Goals Challenge, and then I used to work for maternal and child health. Now that has been like presented as a more holistic kind of UN initiative in sustainable development goals. So yeah, I'm interested in it and like would like to use my skills in supporting this alliance. Yep. Thank you.
Namaste.
Thank you. Franco, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes.
Cool.
Kia ora, I'm Franco Noel. I am based in Queenstown. I run a community trust to support the ethnic and migrant community in Queenstown Lake District. And as well, I'm a member of New Zealand Red Cross and an active member in Sustainable Queenstown, with a few more like change maker, like creating like different programs and projects all the time. I'm quite motivated. Thank you. Okay.
Hi, I'm Reini. I'm one of the scientists that Roger Robson-Williams is talking about. I'm working for Plant and Food Research. I am a plant pathologist, but my main interest is climate change. We have to make this a priority. I find it extremely frustrating that nothing's been done over the past 40 years when we've known this for 40 years. And we've just been sitting on our hands, watching this disaster unfold and, just not do anything. And we must act now. And that's my main beef. Thank you.
Kia ora, everyone. Thank you so much. Hey, just in the interest of time, I sort of always feel like I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Oh, you can probably see all my MC notes for tonight. I always enjoy spending time in the intro session and just want to talk to people, but I have a brief to bring you in here. Sorry, I apologize. You're going to literally see all my notes everywhere. So can everybody see this okay? We've
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, cool. We got a bit of an overview from Sally around she used the water break-even goal, but our example we're going to look at here at the moment tonight is the break-even goal of employees are paid at least a living wage.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to just read through all the text on the screen because I'm aware we haven't got that much time, but I can zoom in a little bit so that maybe you can read that text a little bit better. So in order for a business, if a company were taking meaningful action on this future fit goal, employees are paid at least a living wage, what SDGs would it also be contributing to?
The first one that comes to mind for me is poverty, even though that doesn't kind of go for the guiding questions, it does. That's the one that immediately comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. And
I think number 5, I can't really read it, but
sorry.
About equality or gender equality.
Yeah,
that's number 5, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Because women tend to get paid less and are less likely to get a living wage.
And we'd have to probably change systems within the business so that they were actually monitoring that.
I don't know, but I always feel, like from a business side perspective, because like when government tries to implement the living wage, some of the businesses do kind of, like it's gonna like hamper our business, and it's not a sustainable approach until we have that structure. I don't know. There's always this both side of the debate. So I just wanted to
definitely
have that perspective as well.
Definitely. Yeah.
So that's number 12, isn't it? We have to.
Oh, sorry, I'm doing my tech.
Answer those ones because I can't actually read what they are. Those numbers 1 to 17.
Sorry, I can zoom in a little bit more for you. Is this the bit that you mean here?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's right. It's
So
sorry.
good health and well-being, maybe number 3.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you on that one. I kind of feel like this one feels like it could be all of them in lots of ways. I think. Well,
it's 4 as well.
I was more talking about like number 17, like have that good partnership where businesses support the living wage, and I don't know, the advocates of the living wage, which is always a government. Usually, they also kind of try and see from the business perspective.
I think
Mhm.
4, because if women are paid enough, they can feed their children properly and give them clothes, which would help their education.
Yeah, and
Okay.
also 11 because it's about sustainable communities.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oops. Oh,
Can we move over to see the questions? Because I was interested in, you know,
yeah, sure.
in
The-
those
These
questions.
guiding questions.
Yeah, because it's interesting that I actually don't see how they sit with how that sits then to the ecosystems, but it's lovely to hear people talk about them, because you know how they kind of that's what the speaker was saying before about how they all feed into each other. Like it's not just one, but how it, so that's been quite eye-opening for me today.
And I think part of the issue about being paid a living wage means that we're actually starting to share the wealth, and in order to be able to do that, we have to have people who aren't wanting to have another pair of shoes over and above the 50 they already own. and so, you know, thinking about, you know, how much is enough, and understanding as a privileged person growing up, you know, what is enough? How big does your house need to be? How many bathrooms do you need for a family? How many houses do you need? And so, you know, whilst we're talking about improving people's standard of living, we have to have kind of an upper level about what's fair and reasonable, I think. And that's an interesting conversation.
Agreed.
Especially for a privileged country like New Zealand. And if we're looking at our poverty levels, you know, we hear that 4% of Pākehā children are living in poverty, which actually means that 96% aren't.
We're all back, Chloe.
I know, I'm sorry. Thank you, Vim.
You're welcome.
I had my screen share going and I was so invested in that conversation, so thank you. My apologies. Cool. Kia ora. I think that looks like most people have returned to this main space. So yeah, I believe now we have some time for a bit of a reflection. So over to you, Roger.
Thanks, Chloe. Yep, we've got a few minutes just to reflect on those breakout sessions, and I'm interested to hear from anybody really any thought that those breakout sessions might have sparked, or any insights into the Future Fit Business Benchmark, or something you might have a constructive criticism of it. Anything of that nature would be really welcome.
I was guilty of slightly sidetracking our group to think about the break-even goals as opposed to the SDG goals, and what the function of the SDG goals was. I mean, what the function of businesses trying to specify which SDG goals they met, as opposed to just getting on with addressing some of their sustainability issues.
Yeah, which is really a really good question. And where did your group land on that question?
Well, we got sucked away before we resolved it. Someone else might want to comment on that.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Lynn. Other thoughts or comments from the breakouts? I guess I'm interested, does the benchmark look as though it might be at all useful for organizations that you either work in or interact with?
Well, as I said, I'm, as we speak, marking assignments where I've got students to apply the Future Fit benchmark to companies, and and it's quite interesting seeing what they've come up with out of doing it. And just to conclude the last comment, I think we were agreeing that the SDGs was a very good communication tool, as in, you know, showing where you are, that you are committed to the global consensus on those particular goals.
Yeah. And just, sorry everybody, but just Lynn, you mentioned students, and if you were ever interested in having a kind of an organisation that had applied it in anger, having a chat with any of your students, just get in touch.
Don't worry, Roger, I've already got you on my list.
sorry, I've got a bit of static. Got a bit of static on the call just then. Anyway, sorry. So other thoughts? Sylvia, it looked like you were poised.
Yes, thank you. In my work with the community agencies, I'm just not sure how useful it is to make kind of long lists of possible actions. My question is about prioritizing. So here's a practical example. So I'm working with a large social service agency in Christchurch, and they own a number of cars, and they're talking about how much of a priority is it to move to them to move their vehicle fleet away from petrol cars. But then one of the key staff person, who's a real advocate for environmental things, is really concerned about the batteries and how they're produced and where they might go. So you've kind of got this tussle between the goals around carbon emissions versus the goals around some of the sustainable production, and it feels quite an ethical one and kind of an emotive one. And I'm wondering what tools this provides in terms of how you might weigh up between some what feel like competing demands of priorities.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good question, isn't it, Sally? And it's quite a big one. That almost feels like one for the main sort of discussion session, doesn't it? Or should we tackle it now? What do you think?
We could tackle it in the bigger discussion, but basically there is a what they call a heat map tool, which helps an organisation prioritise what goals are most important for them. And it's I will find the criteria and share them. I don't have them on my screen, but I will find that for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess my experience so far is that we're dealing with kind of apples and pears. So on the one hand, we've got a measure of how sustainable our energy use is, and on the other hand, we've got a sense of how well we're doing on, for example, anti-discrimination policies, and the two are very different. And how do you kind of prioritize now? So what I'm going to do, and I'm working on it right now, is putting a summary paper to the senior leadership team of Plant and Food to say, this is where we sit. My recommendation, based on the impact that we can create and the effort that's going to be involved in creating that impact, my recommendation is we tackle these ones first. So I think the benchmark is a really useful way of being able to kind of make some decisions around those trade-offs. And I think the kind of ease and impact matrix is a reasonably rational way of doing it. But I think there's also another really important dimension to this, and Sally, forgive me going off topic a bit. We've got the benchmark, really nice quantitative, systems-based, science-based approach to assessing our future fitness. We've also got stuff that people just care about that may not register at all, and actually may not really be all that important in the bigger scheme of things. Composting cafe waste or whatever, but people care about this stuff, and so I think you've got to attend to the hearts bit as well as the minds bit. And in a sense, the benchmark is my attempt to really pull levers at the top of the organization, but I'm really keen to be supporting the composting cafe canteen waste, because that's the thing that captures people's hearts right across the organization. So I think they're two not mutually exclusive. In fact, I think complementary approaches. Anyway, back to the benchmark.
Back onto that battery cars thing. There's been literally hundreds of life cycle analysis done on electric cars, the batteries, all those sort of things. And a review of all these ones concluded that it really depended on what question you're asking, what answer you ended up with. So if for you the mercury was important, then that would be clearly important. If you looked at electricity, then you also have to take into account that fossil fuels use a hell of a lot of electricity during the pumping, shipping process, all the other bits of the refining process, etc. So there's a lot of issues to consider, and you have to think about what are the key ones in your area, your issue.
you seem to be suggesting that's a social consensus that has to be made within the individual firm. So you actually have to have some kind of buy-in, which is what Roger's talking about, capturing the heart, where you make the discussion point, well, would you rather we bought some e-bikes and some decent wet weather gear? Would people accept, and just try and get a feel for where the values of the actual team on the ground sit to deal with those, rather than making, economic decisions or convenience decisions or less shift decisions, to just talk to people and set up some mode of communication within the firm.
I guess my feeling is that the values will be always important, because we try to have completely value-free science, but if you have a particular value, then you somehow end up making that thing aspect come out more important in your life cycle analysis.
I think in any organization, it's really important to get people on board. And so I think that's what Roger was talking about with the cafeteria waste, composting and things like that. If you have something visible that everybody can see and everybody can participate in, then you get people on board, and that way you change behavior, you get people thinking. And at the same time, you also need to keep the eye on the ball and do the bigger picture things. But it's just a way of getting people involved yeah, but I think it's really important to not forget about the bigger picture, though, and have a plan for that too. And I'm really interested to see to find those criteria about how to decide which goals are the most important ones, or how to rank these things. And yeah, so if I can't remember the person's name, but if you have that information on how that is done. Because like you said, we all do have our own priorities. We all have our own things that we think is the most important thing. For me, I think it's climate change. I think unless we tackle climate change, it doesn't really matter how equal the society is, and we're all going to die. We need to tackle this one before anything else. That's my own personal opinion. So but it would be good to see what more informed people how they have ranked it, and yeah, so that would be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Randy. I have found criteria. I'd like to show two things, and then we can go back to this conversation because it's really good. I hope I'm not circuit breaking it, but I think that was.
And just sorry to interrupt, Sally, but Carl, I know Carla's been waiting to say something. So when we've done this, no, that's all good. We'll make sure Carla gets a chance.
Okay, perfect. But this is the future fit criteria for ranking goals. So it's essentially based on 3 different questions that they ask. So the first is the difficulty level of meeting the goal. So if we take renewable energy as an example, and we take Air New Zealand as an example, how difficult would it be for Air New Zealand to go to fully renewable energy, being that they're an airline and they're heavily reliant on fuel, which there isn't really a viable alternative for in terms of their activities. So it's either minor, significant, or major. So minor is just changing a policy. Significant is changes to products. Major requires technological breakthroughs. It would probably be major because we need a technological breakthrough to be able to fly planes that run on renewable energy. And then you look at the depth of societal impact if the goal isn't met. So again, it's either minor if it's little or no harm to societies if they don't take action on this goal, significant if growth would cause additional but moderate levels of harm, or major if it would cause irreversible, ongoing, or high levels of harm. So if Air New Zealand grew its fleet massively and continued to use non-renewable fuels, it would probably be quite a major. And then disruption risks to the business if they don't act. So minor if it's just reputational or regulatory. Significant risk would be may disrupt their license to operate, resilience and revenue streams. And major is it would undermine the long-term viability of the business. This is kind of an interesting run, right? Because at the moment they're doing what they can. It's probably reputational, but as we get more stringent on carbon and require bigger action on companies heading towards renewable energy and the Climate Change Commission recommendations kick in, and companies actually have to under regulation take action, we're probably going to have to upgrade this. But anyway, each goal gets a score, and then you get your high priority scores. I'm just going to share one more screen before we go to Carla, because this kind of relates, well, this does relate. And I'll be very quick because this should not just be me talking the whole time. But this is an example of where you can see all your high, medium and low business risks. So you can actually do this online. So that criteria that I just showed you, you can go in online and then answer a whole bunch of yes or no questions relating to your business activities for each goal. So this is energy use. So you'd go in, say we were in New Zealand, you'd answer yes or no to whether or not these criteria apply to you. And then they use that underlying methodology to come up with what your high, medium and low risks are. And then what they've also done is mapped them to the SDGs. And they give you a rationale of why the goal relates to the SDGs. And you can sort by either your highest priority break-even goal, or you can sort it by your highest priority SDGs. So they've weighted the SDGs as well. So that's another tool that's really useful for a business to identify its impacts and its priorities, which is also online. But I will stop talking now, and hopefully that's added a bit more clarity. But let's go to Carla.
Thank you. I was tautoko to everybody who's gone before me. It's just I really relate. And for me, I think a breakthrough in thinking has been everything that I've been doing up until now around the SDGs and integrated reporting and all that sort of thing has always focused on, just choosing those. And they always say around 4 or 5 sustainable development goals. They go, just choose those 4 or 5. You can only choose those 4 or 5. But I really like, I feel like I've opened my mind to what you were saying, Sally, around them all being interrelated. And that really came across when we started doing the living wage one, where it kind of got to the point where we were like, well, it's kind of all of them, in somewhere or another, it kind of like impacts all of them. And it is, I think it is really just important, as you say, to shine a light on your business. I really, really enjoyed Roger saying that, there is ways of looking at, just looking different ways at putting that gaze on your business and what decisions you're making around how you do that business. So thank you very much. Thank you for my group as well, because that was quite eye-opening in the group. So thank you.
Just, does anybody else have any reflections? Roger, we've kind of just merged this into the Q&A because it's been a really great conversation. I am noticing that we are almost coming up to 8:30, and I know that Chloe's got something to close us out with, but maybe we'll do one last reflection or question that anybody has.
There's been a couple of good questions come through in the chat. And sorry, Franco, I see you raising your hand.
And I think Lucy was poised.
Hey, look, we have got a little bit more time. I don't want to hold people here against their will. We do finish at 8:30, but if people are engaged and enjoying the kōrero, by all means, we can stick around. That's from my perspective. Sally and Roger, you might. Yeah. So, Franco, would you like to start, and then maybe Lucy, and we could see how we go with time after that.
Sure, thank you. Yes, I'm based in Queenstown here, and I really keen to keep sharing this message with the other business and my community together. So I wonder if there's any recommendation how can we do that, because we're pretty much having like coffee thing every other week, like talking about this, but all this to understand each other and start working look like pretty good. So I wonder if there is any tool that I can access in order to share with my community here.
You broke up a little bit, but I think I got the gist. and I think it was a really valuable question, and please correct me if I got this wrong, but was your question on any tools that you can share to help build the community? I'm seeing some nods. So as I mentioned, all of the resources, all the resources are open source. So that's a plus. You can go online and get them. They've also got what's called a changemaker community, which you can sign up to. And it's the Mighty Networks site with the global community of people using FutureFit. And it's a great resource to share ideas, share learnings on what's worked for small companies, for large companies. They've got a whole bunch of additional resources. So to access that, there is an additional cost. I don't know off the top of my head how much it is. I think it's something like £15 or something for a year's access, but that might be wrong. I'll find the links and pop them in there for you. But yeah, those are really valuable resources.
Cool. Lucy, you wanted to chip in.
Yes, thank you, Roger. Yeah, it's mainly a reflection. I was just appreciating what Lynn was mentioning about the exercise, and that it's a sort of the bringing together the consensus building that was created through the development of the SDGs, and then the science behind the actual the FutureFit benchmarks. And so appreciating that. Also, the other thing I was thinking about within the context of AUT, we've decided to report on our progress against all of the SDGs. And so I was thinking about it, how we can do that, but also I think something that had also come up in the discussion around values and being able to incorporate. We've got particular values around Māori ora, I think whanaungatanga, that's particular to sustainability within AUT, but also bringing in other values that are sort of more generic across AUT, being able to bring them into sort of kind of, you know, because when you've got a global SDGs, then the FutureFit benchmark, and then being able to bring your, you know, your own organization's values in to sort of make, to personalize it a bit more and make it a more relatable to our staff and students. So that was my main, it was a reflection and observation really.
Yeah, and look, it's really, really, really interesting observation, and the FutureFit business benchmark is very much born out of a Western reductionist science worldview, and that's fine, and it does a certain thing, but it would be interesting to see how it could be kind of adapted to Aotearoa, and yeah, broadened in some dimensions, I think. But yeah, right now I think it's a really useful tool, and to do exactly what you're trying to do in terms of mapping your contribution to the SDGs. Yeah.
I was just wondering if I could respond to Annie's question, though. I think she might have gone now. Sally, you might like, but she's questioning why they're called the break-even goals as opposed to the breakthrough goals. And I think my understanding is that it's just making the point that to even stop causing harm is the break-even, as opposed to it's not a financial break-even, it's a actual stop being unsustainable. And then the positive pursuits are when you actually start doing some restorative stuff or expanding out from your own organisation to helping others.
And I'd just add to that the idea that you can't overcompensate by doing a lot of good in one area if you're doing harm in another. You need to be doing no harm as well as doing good. Yeah. So we're in this kind of weird, I'm not sure if I'm facilitating this bit or Sally is or Chloe is. It seems to be working, but how are we doing for time? Are we still okay? Is there any other kind of questions, comments, reflections anybody wants to chip in with?
there is one other question in the chat that might be a simple one. I'm not sure about from Annie as well. How many companies are using the system and how has it worked so far? It might be nice to record that piece too.
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's a global benchmark. So in terms of how many in the world, I'm actually not entirely sure. In terms of New Zealand, that we know of, because obviously it's an open source tool, so a company could be using it without anybody really knowing. But it's sort of about 5 or 6 at the publicly using it. So it's still in quite its early infancy stages, and that's big, really large companies. So Tourism Holdings Limited, they own Maui and Brits camper vans. They have been using it for a couple of years. They've got really a beautifully written annual report, if you can say that about annual reports. And I think it was their 2019 one where they adopted it and basically laid out why they were doing it. And they've since published another one that shows progress on that. Zip Trek, which is a really small zip lining, amazing tourism company based in Queenstown, have been using it for a couple of years now as well. They're epic, they're amazing. The Fermentus, which is a small microbrewery in Christchurch, have been using it. Fuji Xerox as well. I can't remember the other ones off the top of my head, but there's a range of organisations using them, again, that we know of, and they're open source, so you can use it however you like, however it makes sense for you. But yeah, we are trying to build a community. It's only going to get easier if we can all share our learnings.
And do you do training on it, Sally?
We do. We do training. So again, as I said, it's open source. We are looking at offering a strategy training in August, which will look at the tool and also human design to solve some of these issues. We haven't locked that date in yet. And we've done a couple of sort of webinars as well, but we really believe in the tool and we are just keen to help as many people as we can. So if we can sort of help you work your way through it, we're very happy to do that, or bounce ideas, or yeah, whatever that looks like.
Beautiful. Kia ora everyone. I might have to be the bearer of bad news and say maybe it is time to formally end this moment. So I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Sally and to Roger for leading such a wonderful workshop, and to all of you in this space for participating. So show of appreciation is always a good time. So thank you, and thank you for being part of the part of Aotearoa's SDG journey. It's really fantastic to have you all here, and we really recognise and really honoured by all the mahi and all the work that you're doing. So yahoo, thank you so much. I'll pop some links up in the chat, because for those that are interested who still have a little bit more energy on a Thursday night, can pop on over into the panel kōrero. As I said at the beginning, you might catch the end of the intergenerational conversations and justice panel. So I can pop that Zoom link in the chat. Yeah, otherwise, kia ora, the chat will be saved. And I've heard that Sally and Roger are happy to answer questions beyond this hui. So I hope I didn't just promise something. But anyway, I'll put their emails out there as well. So kia ora.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's been great. Thank you.
Ooh. Sorry, I'm a bit slow on my chat box. There we go. For those interested, cool. Otherwise, kia ora. I'll wait here kindly for everybody to depart. So, yeah. Cool. Kia ora, Alison. It's nice to see you. Bye.
Thanks for joining, Rainey.
Cool. All right. I might press the big end button.
Oh.
Here we go. Cool. Kia ora. All right. Hey, thanks, Sally. Thanks, Roger. I like to have a little moment. I love having a little moment after.
Yeah, it's nice to have a little moment.
Yeah.
Well done. That went well, didn't it?
I think it went really well. The discussion was really good. Yeah, really glad. I think there was a lot of people really grappling with it. So that's great.
Yeah, and you did a great intro. You just totally nailed that, Sally. It was short but clear and covered all the grounds. Just really good.
Thanks, Roger.
It was really cool. Everyone was so engaged. That was like, man, I've definitely run workshops and people have kind of like sat there like, man, it was awesome, you know. It was like, gosh, we have to run a whole another session on Q&A, you know. It was really cool.
It was cool. And
very powerful, I thought, Roger, what you said about bringing the heart into that work as well. I feel like everyone was just nodding and it really resonated with everyone. So
well, thank you very much indeed for the privilege to kind of work with you both on this evening. Really appreciated that, and the kind of introduction to a community that I'm just beginning to kind of understand a bit better. So really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Cool, likewise. Thanks, guys. Hopefully we'll do something else soon.
Hopefully our paths connect.
Let's.
And hopefully, I don't know if it fits with your lives, but love to see you at the in-person SDG Summit in September, if that's a space. I think I know Plant and Food are involved in the Lincoln piece anyway, Roger. But
for sure.
Cool. Oh well, if not, maybe before, but who knows?
Okay.
All right. Have a beautiful rest of your evenings. All right.
Bye.
Happy day. See ya.